Hey, welcome to our first trial edition of Pizza Talk, presented by Pizza Quest. And I'm here with our pizza yodis, our dominant, well, I'll just call them our dough masters, John Arena and Brian Spangler. And we're going to do a little recreation of a workshop and panel that we've done at Pizza Expo called Tinkering with Your Dough. And so we're going to spend the next few minutes just talking about the things that we've learned about how to master your dough and take it to another level. And what I really want to do is let John and Brian, who both have world famous pizzerias, talk about what they've done, maybe tell us a little bit about their journey. And then we'll take some questions and we'll see where we go with it. So John, why don't you give us a start? Tell us a little bit about yourself and Pizzeria Metro, or Metro, you call it Metro Pizza, right?
Okay. Hey, I'm the co-founder of Metro Pizza in Las Vegas. We have 5 pizzerias plus a licensed unit in the airport. I've been making pizzas. I started working my family pizzeria in 1965 when I was 11 years old. I hated it. I swore I was never going to be in the pizza business. And then the day that I turned 13, September 6, 1967, my uncle had me make a pizza, and the first pizza that I made got put in a box and sold. And it changed everything for me. Because I realized that something that I made with my hands, somebody was willing to pay money for. And I turned to my uncle and I was like, wow, this is great. Somebody paid money for something for a pizza that I made myself. And he said, yeah, but you have to be respectful of that, because something that you made with your hands is now going to become part of somebody's body. And it was like a light switch went off and I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And I was lucky enough to be born into a pizza family. I'm in my 53rd year making pizzas, and people ask me all the time, wow, doesn't it get old? You've been doing the same thing your whole life. It never gets old. It's always changing. It's always evolving. I was very lucky. My dad was not one of those old school mentors that said, don't change anything. Don't fix it if it ain't broke. My dad always said, if it ain't broke, break it and then make it better. So I got lucky.
Very lucky.
Yeah.
But so like when you started when you were like a 13-year-old kid and you're making pizzas, you were obviously just doing what you were told to do. You followed a recipe, or you did this or that. But when was it that you became aware that there's something more going on here? There's kind of a science behind it and an art and a craft, where you began to kind of explore how you could break it and make it better.
I think, it was always my dad was at conflict with his brothers, because they were always like, they were typical New York style pizza makers. They had a bucket with a line drawn on it by my Uncle Tony in 1958. And that was where the water went up to. And they had, you asked them how much salt went in the dough, they held up their hand like this. And My dad was exactly the opposite. My dad was always, how do you have control over this if you don't measure it? And at that time, naturally, we were measuring by volume, but he was trying to be as precise as you could be for that era. And I think by 1980, when we opened our first store when we moved to Las Vegas and opened our first store, we realized that we weren't going to be making every batch of dough, and we weren't going to be making every pizza. And if you didn't have standards, if you didn't have precision, you were never going to have consistency. And then from that consistency, because of my dad's input, he was like, well, consistency can also be a form of stagnation. You have to be consistent in terms of quality, in terms of value, but you also have to be constantly experimenting. There's no way that the first batch of dough that you made in your life was the perfect batch of dough and it could never be improved. So, my dad's 92 years old and he's still saying that to me. He's always striving to make it better.
He's still working in the pizzeria, right?
Yeah, he's got to earn a paycheck.
Well, that's really rare. You had a really rare opportunity. Your dad was so far ahead of his time, just in his thinking and the idea of being flexible and realizing that there's always another, rung of the ladder to climb. I think that's rare, and it's showing now as you guys have, evolved as both a company, as a business, and also the types of pizzas that you serve. So that you've taken us up to Vegas. Let's come back to you in a little bit and talk more about that. But let's bring Brian in and hear a little bit about how sort of he came from his background. Because when I first met Brian, he was an artisan bread maker, and he got into pizza sort of coming through a different angle from the bread community. So Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Well, yeah, as you said, I've been baking I started baking in 1987, first job in college, and fell in love with the process and the structure of it, of bringing bread to life, and kind of tripped around the restaurant industry for a long time. When I finally moved to Portland, Oregon, I was like either brewing or baking or cooking or bartending, just always been in the industry. But when we moved to Portland, Oregon, we wanted to start our own business and quickly identified there was not a lot of really good artisan bread here. There was a couple spots, but not a ton of it. And definitely nobody doing what I wanted to do, which was a little more of like the Eastern European, more whole grain sourdoughs, doing like the Flemish Dessum, what have you. And we started a bakery called Olive Mountain Baking Company. And it was really like, it was me. I built my own oven, lived with Alan Scott for a while, and apprenticed with
Scott, the famous wood-fired oven builder, right?
Yes, Alan had started making ovens for people like Alice Waters at Chez Panny in Oakland, and then he started taking people in, like Chad Robertson lived with Alan, and Alan built the first oven for Chad Robertson from Tartine, and now so many people have his heat retention ovens throughout the country. But when I didn't have a whole ton of money to start my business, so I built an Alan Scott oven by myself, and I couldn't afford a mixer and all this other stuff, no refrigeration. So I was out there making 200 loaves of bread a day by hand without a mixer, having to chop wood and, all that stuff. So while we're getting all that rolling on Sundays, which is my one day off, but I still had to be there to fire the oven for the next day and keep the sourdough cultures fed. We kept looking for good pizza up here in Portland, and we couldn't find any good pizza. Everything was more of that classic West Coast, where everything was topping driven. It was all about like how much crap can you stick on top of a piece of shitty dough, and I'm like, well, I never made a pizza in my entire life, honestly, and I never worked in a pizzeria. So Sundays became kind of our experimentation day, and it was also a way for me to have some social interaction, because I was just out in the bakery all day long by myself. So Kim Nyland's my wife, and another partner here at the Pizza Shoals. And so Sunday just became experimentation day. Come on over, bring a 6-pack, bottle of wine, and we'll be out there just having fun. And after a couple of years of doing, we did this like for 4 years running before we even opened up a pizzeria. After a couple of years, we got really good at it, trying different experiments of ratios and sauce on top or sauce on the bottom and what have you, and always keeping our memories of what we liked as far as classic old school pizza. But for me, like, I always think, people ask me what my favorite pizzeria is. I think of places like Patsy's up in East Harlem, something really simple, but it's transcendent because it's so simple. It's simple yet elusive. And
so these, like your frame of reference for great pizza, were at some of these New York and East Coast style places.
Yeah, because all my family's from the East Coast, as far south as Virginia, as far north as New Hampshire. So places in Philly and New York, and I went to school in New York for a while. So that was kind of like, her and I had this very similar kind of like gold standard that we were reaching for. And it got so good at it that on my day off, we were suddenly making 60 pizzas on my day off, and we decided to just go for it. And that was
hey, I'm in the wrong business here.
It would happen 16 years ago, and we just it was slow at first, but then it exploded, and it's been amazing. There've been a series of events that brought a lot of national, international notoriety. The article that was including you when you came out, when you were doing your book tour of American Pie, that blew us up locally. And then, things like Anthony Bourdain came through 14 years ago, and that took us to another level.
Yeah, that took us global. Yeah, well, that was a huge opportunity and breakthrough for you, which suddenly. And I know there's a whole lot more to this story, but what I want to do is take a break. We're going to take a little bit of a break. We're going to come back in a couple of minutes, and we'll talk some more with John Arena and Brian Spangler, two of who I'm calling the Yodas of pizza, or the pizza Yodis. I want to call this section tinkering with your dough with the pizza Yodis. And we're going to keep, build on this segment over the next series of months and episodes that we do, and add to it, because we can't get it all in one shot. But over time, I think we're going to cover a wide variety of territory. And when we come back, I want to talk with both of you about some of the things that you've learned as you've evolved your dough and taken it, as John said, breaking it and fixing it and putting it back together and taking it to another level. And I know, Brian, when I first saw your pizza at Scholl's, the dough you were making then is different from what you're doing now. So I'd like to hear some of the things you've learned that you've applied to take it again to another level.